Hello, this is Simpfortyrie, and the first episode of the podcast. This is going to be the most frequent type of content on my channel, where I just have a podcast and talk football or whatever. But before we get into this, my Twitter is, if you don't know it, Simpfortyrie, and my Twitch is Pandaistheone. I stream once a week on Twitch. So the first thing we're going to talk about on the podcast is like the channel goal outlook and like what I plan to do on here. Obviously, I want to do the podcast at least once a week, at the very least. And I want to get content out on this channel like 2-3 times a week. It all depends on how my schedule works out and everything. That's like the initial goal. So now, the next thing we're going to talk about. On the top 10 quarterbacks in the 2022 NFL Draft, I said it's possible that we get more starters out of this class than we did in 2021. I want to clarify what I said here. Is it likely that happens? Probably not. Is it possible? Yes. Just like it is with the 2021 class that we could be getting 6 or 7 starters depending on Davis, Mills, and Kellen Mond. But I just feel like with the 2022 draft class, I should say, there are more guys down the board than there are in this class. I'm significantly more confident in the depth of this class than I am in 2021. 2021, this was a little sneaky thing. They had the least amount of quarterbacks drafted. Or they tied, I think, the least amount of quarterbacks drafted since the turn of the century. So this was just a flat-out top-heavy class with pretty much no depth. Alright, so now we're going to transition into the next topic of the podcast. And we're going to talk some X's and O's and talk about Shane Waldron on the Seahawks. He's their new offensive coordinator. And recently I was doing some deep digging and research into the 2018 Rams offense, which is what I expect he's going to try and replicate, bringing over his Rams roots. And what sells me on the idea that they're trying to replicate the 2018 Rams offense is that they took Dwayne Eskridge in the second round with their first pick in the draft because they had no first round pick. Obviously for the Jamal Adams trade. They had months to think about this. They settled on a wide receiver. And that says to me they want to go for more of the 2018 Rams offense, which ran tons of 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back. I expect in this new offense, Dwayne Eskridge and Tyler Lockett, they're going to rotate around the wide receiver and the slot. And they're going to play pretty similar roles. And what I expect as a part of the new scheme is they want to get DK as much one-on-one looks as physically possible. They want to isolate him and make it harder for defenses to account when you have so much speed in Dwayne Eskridge and Tyler Lockett working underneath. And what sells me on this idea that they're trying to replicate the 2018 Rams offense even more is how they put a high priority on bringing in undrafted free agent wide receivers Connor Weddington, who is just a kick returner though, but he has some speed. Tamorrion Terry, one of the biggest name undrafted free agents. And then Cade Johnson, who for some people was like a third round prospect. I never was that high on him. I said, he's honestly somewhat like a poor man's Tyler Lockett. He just doesn't have this anywhere near the speed of Lockett. But he has really good quickness and route running. I expect him and Freddie Swain to rotate in like the Tyler Lockett or Dwayne Eskridge role as the guy who's probably in the slot occasionally, working underneath the field. And now I want to talk about in the side of the scheme, Gerald Everett. He already knows the scheme. He's worked with Shane Waldron in Los Angeles. He's a perfect scheme fit for... Well, I need to backtrack a little bit. Shane Waldron, simply by being a disciple of McVay, he's going to bring over some elements from the Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Gary Kubiak offense. And that's running wide zones, play action, bootleg, leak outs. He's already familiar with a lot of the concepts that they're going to bring over. And he's now the number one tight end on his roster. I think he's pretty clearly better than Will Dissly. Will Dissly's a good player, but he's slower than a brick. He's just an incredible blocker. So now I want to transition into the next topic. And we're going to spend some time talking about Sam Darnold and what I personally expect out of him in Carolina now. I feel like the expectations right now are probably a little bit too high. I think people are expecting him to assuredly be a top 20 quarterback. I think it's very possible he is. But I also think it's very possible he isn't. They have a pretty poor offensive line, in my opinion. They have Matt Paradise. They have Taylor Moton. I really was not a fan of Brady Christensen in the draft, personally. And one thing I kind of worry about is I thought his blitz recognition was really bad. And Sam Darnold's biggest issue, I should say, is processing. And I worry about the combination of Christensen not picking up a blitz and Darnold maybe not picking it up either. And that leads to a very exploitable left side of the O-line from a blitz perspective. And one other concern I have with Christensen is he has really short arms, and I question if he'll be able to handle power. He's really light. And then even more on the offensive line, they don't have good guards. Pat Elflein and Cam Irving, they're pretty bad. And that's being generous. Elflein was cut from the Vikings O-line, who had even worse guards. That says a lot. Now for what I more expect from Darnold. I think we're going to see more frequent flashes from him. I think there will be weeks where he looks like the number 3 overall pick that he was, or even the number 1 overall pick that he's expected to be. But I also think there are weeks where he looks like Jameis Winston, or just an athletic Jameis Winston. I think that there's a good chance the Panthers go 8-8, and Darnold looks really good. And they're comfortable with him moving forward. But I also think there's a chance it completely backfires and he's just broken. And there's not much saving him. We'll have to see how that all plays out first. But Just some food for thought. For the next segment, we're going to do some award predictions. And I already have this mapped out. But before we get into like the real awards, I'm going to predict like some non-official awards like Breakout Player of the Year, Surprise of the Year. And my pick, well, let me backtrack for a second. My prediction for the Breakout Player of the Year is going to be DeAndre Swift. I think with that O-line, that coach, that play calling, he is one of the most clear and obvious breakout stars. He has now a top 10 O-line at the very least. That still is pretty big upside for improvement. That could end up being a top 3. They have now a play caller that is basically being told only call running plays. They're going back to, I think it's called the flexbone offense. That's only going to have 2 wide receivers on the field. And I want to say like the 2 tight ends line up like right behind the freaking tackles, I think. I'm not entirely familiar with that offense because that's from the freaking 80s. But it's going to be a run-first offense. Now for like the surprise of the year. Call it like the Josh Allen Award, the Lamar Jackson Award. But for this award, I'm going to go with a rookie here, Christian Darrisaw. I think that with the Vikings, who are just showing they also want to pound the rock, he's going to have his weakness as a pass protector limited. Like him falling feels pretty identical to Justin Jefferson for the same team, or like Tristan Wirfs to the Bucks. I think that with NFL coaching now and more real pass sets, he'll be able to develop his footwork and pass protection, which is really his only issue. And there's a good chance he's one of the best tackles to be picked in the 20s in a while. Most great tackles don't come out the 20s. Most of them come pretty high in the draft. And now for like the real awards. My MVP pick, it's going to be Josh Allen. I think the development he showed last year is unbelievable. Everyone would say that. But I expect him to take another massive leap. I think he's going to show much more development from a processing decision-making standpoint. And he already has shown a ton. If he takes another leap, he could be a top 2 quarterback. And I feel like by me projecting him to win MVP, there's a good chance he emerges as the second best quarterback in the NFL. I believe the only thing that kept him out of the true MVP conversation this year was like the 2-week stretch where he wasn't very great. It was the Chiefs and I want to say the Jets, where he wasn't like the elite Josh Allen we saw for most of the year. But I think that he's going to reach the steady week-to-week dominance that he's very well capable of. My defensive player of the year now, call it basic, it's Aaron Donald. I'm not going to bet against him. He was my defensive player of the year pick this year because he had almost similar production to TJ Watt from a 3-tech position and seeing double the amount of double teams that TJ Watt saw, and he was winning them more consistently. He demanded more attention, and was almost as productive. He literally made Leonard Floyd a career. He made Dante Fowler the year before a career. Both those guys just got paid out the bum. Fowler a year before, though. But he's the reason for two guys making a crap ton. My offensive rookie of the year pick now, it's Kyle Pitts. I think without Julio Jones now, he's just going to put up a rookie season for the ages. I think he does eclipse 1,000 yards. And I do think we talk about him as the 5th best tight end, if not better. And here's my bold take for the award predictions. My defensive rookie of the year pick is going to be Asante Samuel Jr. I think now, with Brandon Staley in his ideal scheme, which is the cover 4 scheme that's taking over the NFL now, he could go ballistic. We saw what Darius Williams did with Brandon Staley. Asante Samuel is a better version of Darius Williams. And he's going to start week 1. He is the best, or he might honestly be the best corner on that team outside of Chris Harris. And even then with Chris Harris, he's showing signs of regression. There's a chance Asante Samuel is the next Chris Harris. And if you're getting the next Chris Harris to learn partly from Chris Harris, that is incredible. Now, my next podcast segment, it's going to be about the New York Jets. So let me backtrack. It was about a year ago. I want to say it was after the draft. I said the Washington football team is the biggest sleeper. They would go on to make the playoffs. Say all you want about them going 7-9. But I said that they were going to be a sleeper team. Purely because that defense is loaded. Now, the New York Jets, they're a bit of a different team. Because they're more well-rounded. They have a better offense. And they honestly might have more well-rounded talent across the board. Not necessarily like their talent is better, but they're a more well-versed roster. Part of the reason why I think they're going to be like this year's Washington football team is I think their defense is going to be much improved. Bryce Hall started playing down the line after getting back healthy. He was really good for the Jets. They'll have a competition for the number 2 corner. They potentially could emerge with a starter. I love their safeties with Ashton Davis and Marcus May. Then they're finally getting C.J. Mosley. I kind of say getting because he has played like 1 quarter for them in his contract. Because he had the season-ending injury in 2019. Then in 2020, he opted out. But he's finally going to play, hopefully. Watch him just get hit by a bus and he misses the season. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But the most underrated part about this Jets defense is that defensive line. Carl Lawson was a bargain. Then you have Falorenzo Fatukasi, who is one of the 5 best nose tackles in the league. Really underrated player. And then opposite of Carl Lawson, you have John Franklin Myers, who I want to say put up like a 45 pressure season under the radar was pretty good last year. And then I can't forget about Quinnen Williams, one of the rising superstars of the NFL. He's amazing. He had a poor rookie year, but boy did he come on last year. He looks like he's on a hot track to being top 5 or top 10 interior defensive lineman in the NFL. And then they signed Sheldon Rankins. But if he's your third DT, you could do a lot worse. And then I want to talk about the offense, which is why I'm much higher on them. I was as high as you would really see on Zach Wilson. I thought his pocket presence was the best in the class. I thought his processing was the best in the class. I thought his anticipation was the best in the class. And he's the best off-platform thrower you will ever see from a college prospect. If you try and debate that, you are wrong. Ask any person who played quarterback that watched him. They will all say that. And then, even further than Wilson, they have Denzel Mims, who in year 2 could take a big step up. They brought in Corey Davis on a bargain deal. And then they they drafted Elijah Moore. They still have Jamison Crowder, who's a really good slot receiver. And then here's the one fair criticism. They don't have a good offensive line. Mekhi Becton, you love it. I question how he'll look if they get him on the move, like pulling to the other side of the line. But when they ran outside zones with him last year and he wasn't on the move, he looked pretty good. They take Elijah Vera Tucker in the first round. I was lower on Vera Tucker, but as a guard, he's really solid. And then they have Connor McGovern, who was solid for them last year. Don't know if you can really count on that, though. And then Van Roten, no. And then they have George Fant, who you don't really want to start, but he's probably their best tackle, and because of the scheme, he's probably going to start. And then they don't have much at tight end either. But I do like their little collection of backs they have between LaMichael Pirine, Tevin Coleman, Michael Carter, and Ty Johnson. I think those 4 in like a RBBC could be a solid tandem. Now let's transition into the Atlanta Falcons segment. We were just talking very optimistically. But now with the Falcons, after the Julio Jones trade, I just questioned their organizational direction. I was tweeting about this. I was like, the point of restructuring Matt Ryan and taking Kyle Pitts is to win now. I'm not sure if they had a choice on Julio Jones. But if you did, and you were choosing to trade him, what is the plan? And even if you didn't have a choice, that's a huge part of your team that you're trading away. And then after trading him away, you have a gaping hole at like number 2 receiver. I like Russell Gage, but to count him as a number 1, I'm not very confident in that. Let me correct that. Not as a number 1, as a number 2. But just my whole question with the Falcons is, where are they going? If you can, have Kyle Pitts this year and suck, then land a quarterback in the draft next year, suddenly I like it because Kyle Pitts is going to ring hell upon the league. He's the highest grade I ever gave on a prospect, outside of Saquon Barkley. Just overall, where are the Falcons going? And what does their future hold? Trading away Julio Jones leaves that massive question. So now we're going to get back to more of an optimistic standpoint. I want to talk about Trey Lance. Because I think with Kyle Shanahan, he's going to become the best quarterback out of this class. He has a perfect situation to sit and develop, learn behind Jimmy Garoppolo, who's a great mentor for a guy like Trey Lance. And then you pair Trey Lance with a top 3 offensive mind in the game and Kyle Shanahan. That is a lethal combination. The landing spot is perfect. Trey Lance always was a guy that, if he gets the right development and lands in the right situation, his upside is the sky. There's no ceiling for him. Because he could be potentially Patrick Mahomes in theory. And the only way he was really going to hit that is if he landed with an unbelievable offensive mind, like a Kyle Shanahan. Then in the scheme, his processing shortcomings maybe are going to be hidden by the scheme. Something else that gets me excited is Kyle Shanahan has never had a quarterback like Trey Lance. And if Lance becomes as good as he could be, I want to see how Kyle Shanahan evolves his offense. If he adopts maybe more of the 2018 Rams offense that uses tons of 3 wide receivers, but still uses tons of the Shanahan scheme elements. Now let's transition into the next segment. And this is going to be the NFC West predictions. Actually, one thing I want to add on to the Trey Lance part is I am not a 49ers fan, and I'm confident in saying this. I'm actually a Seahawks fan, for those who didn't know. So back to the NFC West predictions. I think this is clearly going to be the best division in football, with the Steelers potentially fading in the AFC North, and the Bengals just being up in the air. But even then, I think you could make a strong case. The 4 teams in the NFC West are all better. Actually, scratch that. You could make a good case that the 4 teams in the NFC West would all finish second in the AFC North. They're just a more well-rounded they're just a more well-rounded team. They're a more well-rounded division than the AFC North. And I think if you put the Rams in the AFC North, they would probably win that division. But kind of spoiling a little bit, I think the Rams are going to win the division. I think Matthew Stafford could be an MVP candidate with Sean McVay now. I think the Rams are going to go probably like 13-4. And then for the 49ers, I'm not entirely sure where they'll be because they are already hitting the injury bug. They just canceled their mini camp because they don't want to risk injuries. And I think Jimmy Garoppolo will be fine, but he could be a bit restricting on them. And then you still have to remember, they are the 49 IRs. They are going to deal with injuries. It's not a matter of if, it's how many. It sucks to say, but it's honestly the truth. Now for the Cardinal, actually I want to talk about the 49ers record prediction. I'll see like 11-6 or 10-7. Now for the Cardinals, they're one of the hype teams this year, again. And kind of rightfully so. They added tons of talent. And J.J. Watt, getting Chandler Jones back, even though he's showing signs of regression. Adding Rodney Hudson. They've just improved this roster all around. But one part I'm kind of concerned is, even though they've brought in all these veterans that are really good, J.J. Watt is injury prone at this point. Chandler Jones looked like he was starting to lose some of his burst last year for a guy who wasn't the most physically gifted guy. And then the other concern I have is that outside of Chandler Jones and, well, I'm not sure where I come in on Chandler Jones. Let me just say that. I think he'll be like a number 2 pass rusher this year. But my question is, outside of him and J.J. Watt, who else is going to step up? I don't really see anyone else. Now for the Seahawks. Actually, I need to say the Cardinals record prediction. Let me say like 9-8. I just think, well, also the other big problem with the Cardinals is Cliff Kingsbury. Personally, I would have fired him if I were the Cardinals, because he's a fraud, and he's not a good play caller at all. That doesn't know a lot about scheming. Despite being in such a scheme-centric scheme, if that actually, no, that does not make sense at all. Despite running a scheme that puts tons of pressure on designing pass concepts. Now for the Seahawks, I think they've had an extremely underrated offseason. Because they brought in Gerald Everett. They brought in Gabe Jackson. I'm going to check like the Our Lads. They made tons of signings. They brought back Chris Carson for the Our Lads. They'll get Rashad Penny back to full go. They added in Dwayne Eskridge, Tamorion Terry, and Cade Johnson. Gabe Jackson's going to have another year, or not Gabe Jackson, Damian Lewis is going to have another year of development. We brought Al Woods back. We added in Kerry Hyder. We brought back Carlos Dunlap. Jordan Brooks is going to step into a starting role, and I think is going to have a massive breakout year. They're getting Marquise Blair back, even though he's not really going to see the field. We drafted Trey Brown, who was just dominant at the Senior Bowl. Also, for those who know, we got Nate Evans, the legendary linebacker who spawned 2019 Joe Burrow Heisman winning season. Now to get back more on track, if the Seahawks can get Aldon Smith to play, and he's out of legal trouble, and he's motivated, which is a big question, the pass rush could be a pretty big strength for them after being a clear-cut weakness. It's just, what are they getting in that secondary that, honestly, outside of DJ Reed and Jamal Adams, or let me backtrack, outside of DJ Reed in that safety room, what are they getting? Ugo Amadi showed signs of development, but he was really inconsistent last year. Then the number 2 corner is going to be, what, Akelu Witherspoon or Trey Brown, a rookie corner? I like Trey Brown, but he's a rookie corner. That's still a big question mark. Back to more of the pass rush. I think that Alton Robinson is a low-key breakout candidate. He, in very limited reps, was the Seahawks' best pass rusher last year, outside of, I would say, Jaron Reed, who's not even on the team anymore. And I'm not sure if I mentioned that the Seahawks brought in Gerald Everett, but I think the Seahawks are kind of being slept on a little bit because they've had a really good offseason. And people got this vibe that they're just deprived of talent after Russell Wilson was allegedly upset, which was never the case. But now for my record prediction. I'm going to go 11-6 or 10-7. Now let's transition into the second to last segment of the pod. It's going to be about Orlando Brown. And the ... says it all. Let me be straight up. He is a top 5 overrated player in the league. And there's this consensus around NFL Twitter and wherever you look that because he got traded for a first-round pick, he is a superstar tackle. Most people don't even actually watch offensive line tape. He has really bad footwork. He has terrible movement skills. He can't handle any sort of power. He was good at right tackle in 2019, but that was also playing right next to Marshall Yanda. If I'm being honest, the Ravens won that trade by a significant amount. The Chiefs could have gotten Tevin Jenkins or Samuel Cosmi at pick 31, who might be better tackles than Orlando Brown. If I'm being quite honest. Definitely higher upside tackles. Orlando Brown tries to be Trent Brown without being Trent Brown. If you're going to be Trent Brown and be the guy who lacks like a lot of the technique and a lot of the movement skills, you have to be freakishly strong. Orlando Brown just isn't that. If I'm being honest. And the Chiefs are probably about to pay the ever-living crap out of him because he has all the leverage in the world. So I actually forgot to make a slide for this. So I'm going to go back to the first one. But the last segment, it's going to be about Carson Wentz. And I guess you could throw Sam Darnold into this. Why trading the capital that the teams did to get him will be worth it. If you want to look at the NFL, they were not high on Justin Fields. And it's because it's a legitimate concern that at any moment you could get that Indiana game or the Northwestern game where defensive backs are just manipulating him, where he's making dumb decisions and looks terrible. And the Colts and Panthers, what were their options? Really? If the NFL didn't think very highly of Justin Fields, what were their options? They had none. It was either trade draft capital to get a quarterback with week-to-week incredible upside, or get stuck in purgatory with like a Jacoby Brissett or a Teddy Bridgewater. Although I do think that if the Panthers didn't trade for Darnold, they probably would have taken Fields. But again, by the looks of it, they were not all in on Fields by any means. And then with the Colts, they weren't even in a position to go get a Justin Fields. They were not going to get him. They weren't going to get Mac Jones. So that's going to do it for the podcast. Again, my Twitter is Simpfortyrie if you don't know. And then my Twitch is twitch.tv/Pandaistheone. Thank you for watching.